that the number one thing you need to do is to learn to live below your means. That's the bottom line, man. Like, if you tell people to invest, that's fine, but you can invest $1,000 a month, but then you could use your credit card and now you are, buying Gucci and Prada and all these expensive things, but you're going into the hole each month because you're spending $1,500 a month extra over here and you're investing $1,000 a month. You're still behind the game.
Welcome to the Teacher Money Show, the podcast dedicated to helping teachers navigate your unique financial challenges and unlock your financial superpowers. I'm your host, Shaun Morgan, a full-time teacher. That's right, I teach every day just like you, and personal financial coach. And I'm here to help every teacher, whether you're a seasoned teacher looking for fresh insights or a new educator navigating your first paycheck, to have a richer wallet, classroom, and life. The contents of this podcast are informational in nature and are not legal or tax advice, and neither I nor my guests are engaged in the provision of legal, tax, or any other advice. You should not act upon this information without first seeking appropriate advice from an accountant, financial planner, lawyer, or other professional. I am super excited to have Rashad Muhammad on the show today. Rashad, I've known him for a few years now, and we've collaborated a few times. But just to give you an idea of how awesome this guy is, he is a district-level K-12 school administrator who has teamed with his wife, a special education teacher. So we got two educators together to become a millionaire couple. He's currently spending his spare time educating others on how to build sustainable wealth while maintaining a stable lifestyle. He operates the YouTube channel Rashad the Wealth Coach, where he currently has over 2,000 subscribers. This guy knows what he's talking about. It's going to be a great conversation. Rashad, welcome to the show.
Hey, Shaun, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation.
It's going to be awesome. So let's just dive right in with you, just getting to know you a little bit better. Where did your journey in education begin? What have you done in education? And then how did that transition into you also being interested in personal finance?
Hey, great question. So my wife and I, we got married in 2005, and I actually started teaching back in Florida in 2005. I was an alternative education teacher. And we realized that we weren't going to become wealthy as teachers in Florida because we were looking around at the pay scale and we just were not making that much money. So my wife was from Sacramento, I was from Atlanta, and we wanted to figure out a location where we could both, maximize our salaries. And we literally landed in the middle, in between Atlanta and in Sacramento, and we moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So, I started teaching there, taught a few years. Then I got an administrative position at a middle school. I was an assistant principal and associate principal for 8 years. Then I became an alternative school principal, did that for 4 years, and now I've been at the district level for 3 years. And, during that time, we had 3 children and we went through our financial ups and downs. And, some people don't know, back in 2011, we had a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And even after that, we were still drowning in debt because we had student loans and those kind of things. And we were able to attend Financial Peace University back in 2014. And that's really what changed our lives, because we saw that, hey, we're headed down the same road from 2011 and we needed to do something. So we took FPU together. And ever since then, it's been great. I mean, there have been some ups and downs here and there, but for the most part, we have been able to see that true wealth and sustainable wealth is created slowly but surely. Like you say, the tortoise wins the race over the hare. So that's pretty much our journey,
Yeah, I love that. I mean, just the fact that you had something that woke you up to it is amazing. Many people go through similar situations and then they don't wake up to it. They just keep muddling on. So I love how you became intentional, and that you have grown so much in just a single decade is absolutely incredible. So you said that you are teaming up to be a millionaire couple, right? That is awesome. Was that your goal to get $1 million, or did you have what was your retirement goal like?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I like to clarify with people that, being millionaires, it doesn't always feel like you're a millionaire, because a lot of that, being a millionaire is just $1 million net worth, right? So it is, taking your assets minus your liabilities, and if it's over $1 million, you're a millionaire. I wish I had $1 million sitting in some retirement account, but it will be there hopefully in the next couple of years. But our goal really was just to just get on the same page with finances. And another goal was really to ensure that we are creating wealth for our family. Like, so I never really set out at the beginning to quote unquote be a millionaire. I just knew that as long as we stayed the course, it would happen. Because I started reading these books and watching these podcasts about the millionaires next door and everyday millionaires. And I saw that, hey, it was sustainable. A lot of millionaires get there through their 403B or 401k. So while I didn't necessarily say, okay, the ultimate goal is to be a millionaire, the goal really was financial independence, which of course includes being a millionaire, as you know.
All right, so we're talking about our goals, our financial goals today. Do you have a current financial goal, and has it changed over the years, and why would that be?
I think our financial goal, we're really blessed to have a pension here in Texas. And I'm about, I think, 8 to 8.5 years away from being able to collect a full pension. So my financial goal ultimately is to retire at 52 years old and to never have to work again. But if I want to work again, I have the option. So really my financial goal is to create options in the future for myself and for my family to be able to move where we want, to be able to choose to work or not to work. I believe they call it work optional. So my financial goal ultimately is to have $1 million in investable assets, and then after that, 2 million and so on. So we're well on our way right now. Try to live a modest lifestyle. So if you saw me outside of work, you would just think he's a unassuming guy. You would just think he's not necessarily broke, but just a regular guy.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when people are trying to prepare for this retirement, we can go into what's called moving the goalpost. There can be a problem when you have like somewhere you're trying to get to and it keeps moving around. Can you talk about what that might mean and what that looks like in the context of preparing yourself for retirement?
Hey, a great question. So moving the goalpost actually can have multiple meanings. I think that the way I look at moving the goalpost is how let's suppose we get into a job and we're making $100,000 household income, and we know, hey, at the end of this, the light at the end of this tunnel is that we have, let's say, $1 million in assets, and we're going to live off this 100,000, and now we're going to have $1 million in assets. Well, if we get a raise, let's suppose we double our income to $200,000. Well, before our goal was $1 million. Well, now we up our lifestyle to where we have to also up our goals, and at the end of the day, nothing makes us happy because we are continuing to move the goalposts. Whereas, one thing that we have done throughout the years is that every time we get a raise, that raise goes directly to our 403Bs or 457. We actually are fortunate enough to have two plans in my district where they're low cost plans. So while we were maxing out our 403Bs at one point, now we're able to funnel more money to our 457s because we don't want that, what they call lifestyle creep, to come into play. So when we talk about moving the goalposts, I kind of look at it as like you are continuing to adjust your lifestyle for these unattainable goals, right? That's how I look at it.
Yeah, so I just love how you're clarifying that when we're moving the goalpost, it's not that the number at the end is moving, but the number that has to be at the end is moving, right? Because you're saying like, right now you're going for $1 million, and then hey, $2 million. Having a higher number at the end is not the problem. It's making it so if you don't have that number, you can't retire comfortably. That seems to be the problem, right? When you've inflated your lifestyle to the point that it is impossible for you to retire without the 2 million instead of just the one.
Yeah, hey, and I appreciate you following up on that. That's actually a phenomenal, amazing point, because think about it. As you get closer to retirement, you're way past those child raising years, and your mortgage should be paid off and those kind of things, right? So you should be minimizing your expenses to where, hey, if you have to go from 100% salary to now 75, 80% in a pension, you should be okay with it because you should not have nearly as many expenses as you have had. But what happens is throughout the years, people are taking on more expenses to where they hamstring themselves into all of this debt, so that even if they do retire and they collect a pension and it's too short, so they have to go get a part-time job at Walmart or something like that just to make ends meet. So yeah, you really had a good follow-up regarding moving the goalposts.
So something I've been thinking about here recently is, you're talking about how like you're like 75% in your pension, right? That's 75% of your total salary, your total income, right? But if you're putting in 25% into a retirement account, the amount you're living on is already 75%. So when you retire and pull that pension, it won't really feel that different. Is that correct math?
Yeah, I was talking to a buddy of mine who has the financially independent teachers podcast, and we actually discussed this. And I told him, like, the amazing thing about us is that when we retire, we're going to get a raise because we're funneling so much money into retirement, like pre-tax and post-tax, that once we retire, we're no longer maxing out our 457s and 403bs and HSAs. We're bringing in more money than we were before when we were working. So yeah, you're absolutely correct in that when you are disciplined with your money, once you retire, it's no big deal because, like you said, you're already. I mean, we're probably living on 65% right now, or 60% of our income. So you're right.
Yeah, the rest of that's all just going to be fun money. It's going to be great.
Yeah, no, the kids should be fully launched by then, and we should be totally fine, be able to do whatever we want.
So you've been able to put your entire increase in like your raises into retirement. How are you able to do that? How do you plan for that, especially considering like the inflation and stuff that's been hitting us lately?
That's a good question. I would say just being intentional. Being intentional is very important. Like, that if you're investing, a certain percentage of your income into pre-tax retirement, then if it's not really 3% isn't all that much more. Like, if you look at it as take home, you won't even miss it. So that's why I tell I'm a huge advocate, especially for people who are getting started out with retirement. I'm a huge advocate of the 403b and 457, even over the Roth, only because it's like forced savings. If you have the option of putting your money in a Roth IRA, but now you have an emergency, or if you have a concert that's coming up and you're putting $540 a month into a Roth, now you can just stop that month's payment because you have full control over that, as opposed to having to go to your third party administrator, stopping payment on a 457 or 403b. It's just a lot more cumbersome to start and stop again. So I just like the forced savings aspect of pre-tax. In addition, I'm an advocate of reducing your current taxes as well, your current tax liability. So I think that it's just easy to go in there once you get approved for your raise and tell your third party administrator, hey, I want to add an extra 150 or 200 a month to my 403b payment.
Yeah, that's awesome. The forced savings is definitely huge. Are just out of curiosity, because I feel like this is different from district to district. Do you not have like an interface where you can just change automatic your deductions going in and out, or do you have to like call somebody?
No, I don't have to call anybody. So it's pretty easy. It's easy, but it's still, you still have to go through a few steps. So I just go to, we use Omni 403b, and we just go in there and we have to actually put, I can't remember what it's called. It's called, change your whatever contribution. And it takes a few steps. Once you do that, then they'll communicate to your district that you want to change from $500 to $1,000 a month or whatever that may be. So, it's easier to me to just go to Fidelity or Vanguard, whoever you have your Roth IRA with, and just Actually, you don't have to do anything to not make a contribution. Like, most people don't do automatic contributions into a Roth since they have full control over it anyway. Like when we were maxing out our Roth IRAs, we would go in there physically every month after we get paid and make that contribution. So it's just it's no friction to not go in there and make a Roth contribution that month. Whereas opposed to with your 403b or 457, you need to take a few steps to stop your contribution. A lot of people that automatically invest in a 403b, they don't go in there and stop their contributions. I know people that have been doing $500 a month for 10, 15, 20 years, and they don't stop it because they're not thinking like, hey, if I stop this $500 contribution for January, I'll have an extra $400 in my check. Like they're not necessarily thinking like that. So I think the pre-tax aspect is an incredible wealth building tool.
And it's also important to note that when you put money in, so that way you're not getting taxed on it, the amount that you're putting in is actually not the same amount that comes out of your paycheck because like it's reducing your taxable income. So it's got like a double benefit. The math is always confusing to me because I am not a math teacher, but just because you're not paying the taxes on it, the drop is different than the amount that you're actually putting into your taxable or your pre-tax account, which is pretty incredible as well. So
Yes,
double
sir.
reasons to put money into a pre-tax account. And I'd never thought about this lack of friction way of thinking about it, which I think is just fantastic. Another perspective on why you would want to have those through your employer contributions, just because you can't just on a dime turn that off and put that money in your pocket to do whatever with instead of investing for your retirement.
Yeah. I think especially if you're I actually have a fraternity brother. He's about probably 25, 26 years old. He started teaching in my district, and he reached out to me a few weeks back, and he told me hey, I want to get started with investing. And I could have easily told him, hey, open up a Roth and this is what you invest in or whatever. But I know how young kids are, and I know how adults are in general, right? Like if an emergency, a tire blows out or something happens, the first thing they're going to do is not to necessarily cut down on their lifestyle. It's going to be to stop their retirement contribution, which will be a Roth IRA. So I told him, hey, I think that you need to do an automatic, contribution into your 457 with Fidelity. And I told him the fund and everything, because I know once he starts investing in it, like I said, it's I've seen throughout the years, even with myself, I don't feel like taking 2 or 3 minutes to go in there and make the adjustment to my withdrawal. So I just let it ride out. So, I know, with psychology and everything, people are just going to go and not make a contribution to their Roth that month.
Yeah, I love how lifestyle creep isn't necessarily about forcing yourself to not buy this or that. It's just about limiting the amount of dollars that you have access to, because people grow into the amount of money that they have, really. I mean, this is why I hate the argument, like, we need to pay teachers more because it'll just, be better for teachers. Like, well, would getting just a larger paycheck actually make every teacher's life better? I argue it wouldn't. I think they would just blow it because they don't have the financial education, right? Like, how much would an extra $1,000 really make a difference in your life if you are not investing some of it, if you are not, intentionally using it? It wouldn't make a substantial difference unless you know what to do with it. So I think financial education comes before getting more money, right? So if you can just limit the amount of money you have access to by investing it automatically, then you're going to live a better life long term because you are doing it automatically, and you're going to stay within those limits of, within reason, of course, of lifestyle creep, because there's nowhere to creep to. You don't have that extra, $500 or $1,000 a month to go use on whatever.
Hey, those are great points. And it's not like we're advocating for teachers to not get a raise. We would love to all have a raise. I think what you're saying is that no matter how we can make $150,000 a year, if we don't know what to do with that raise, we're going to be in the exact same place. Let me tell you a quick story. I had had a buddy who got a promotion, and I think his promotion, if I'm not mistaken, was paying him an extra $700 a month, just to kind of round ball figure. Well, about a month later, he has this big old huge truck. It was like $750 a month payment when his other truck was paid off. So I'm like, man, you really essentially given yourself a pay cut by getting a truck you didn't necessarily need. But people sometimes validate their promotions by going out there and getting a thing that they think other people will respect, and it kind of tells people like, man, I've arrived, I made it, when in actuality nobody really cares or pays attention to what you drive. So I agree 100% with what you're saying. I also want to talk about one thing that happens in the educational community quite often, and it's the where teachers complain about getting paid once a month. And I, when I sit down and talk to teachers, I'm like, okay, would you rather get $1,000 the first of each month? Would you rather get $250 four times a month? Would you rather get, $100 10 times a month? It's all the same money. And what you're telling me, if you can't make it on $1,000, or if you can't make it getting paid once a month, that just tells me that you're not budgeting correctly. You're actually living on last month's money. You're not planning ahead. So, and it all goes in line with what you're talking about as far as, lifestyle creep and living beyond your means.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we complain about getting paid dependably once a month, but I mean, there are plenty of people in the world that don't get paid dependably once a month. My father was a contractor, and you got paid when the job was done, right? That's when you got paid. So he'd get, a large chunk of money for finishing the job, and then he'd have to wait until the next, completion point of a job was to get paid. So they'd have to budget. And my parents had 7 kids, so it wasn't easy, but they'd have to budget from, completion point to completion point, and always trying to find more business and things like that. But it's not a curse to have a dependable monthly paycheck. If you know how to plan it accordingly, you can plan it accordingly. If you are getting paid irregularly, you can plan it. If you're getting paid, commission, and you don't know when it's going to come, you can plan it. If you're getting paid once a month, every other week, whatever it is very possible to handle that with a plan. But if you don't have a plan, it doesn't matter if you get paid once a year or once a day, it's still going to be out the door before you know it.
You're 100% correct. I mean, think about it. Every bill is due once a month. So you get paid, pay all your bills, and now you just basically budget the rest. You can pay yourself 2 or 3 times a month if you want. You put that money in your savings account, then every week move over some money. Like, essentially, I think what we argue when we say we can't live on once a month pay is that we aren't responsible enough to handle our money. And that's not a knock on anybody. It's just a fact. Like, there's no difference between once a month and once every 2 weeks. It's the same thing.
And that's exactly what I meant, was that if we just come back to financial literacy first, understanding the basic principles of finance first, then we can get that raise. Then we can get, these additional funds and use it very, very wisely. But if we don't have that foundation to begin with, it's not going to make a difference for sure.
Yeah, you're correct, Shaun. And think about it, Shaun. If you have $100,000 salary, but you have $101,000 in obligations, as opposed to somebody who has a $70,000 salary and $69,000 in obligations, whose financial situation is better? I mean, it's the person who's living below their means. So it doesn't necessarily matter how much you're making, as long as you're able to, properly budget.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk more about financial goal setting here real quick. Let's say that I'm getting ready to, get control of my finances. I understand that I need to, understand how to keep money every single month, budget correctly, and I'm trying to figure out what the correct goal is to have, so that way I'm getting there realistically with my budget constraints. How do you go about setting a financial goal for retirement?
That's a great question. I think with any goal, I think you have the opportunity to be more successful if you begin with the end in mind. So for instance, like we know what we want to do. We know we want to travel quite a bit. That's going to be our happy place in retirement. And you need to know like what is that cost in today's dollars? What will it approximately cost in retirement dollars? And how can I meet those needs? How can I fund that lifestyle? How can I fund that retirement account? And that's basically it. I mean, it really is as simple as estimating how much you live on today, how much you're going to live on when you retire, and using those numbers to figure out what you need to funnel away each month. And like I said, we have a pension, and our to be honest with you, our pension can pretty much cover all of our retirement expenses. However, we have these other retirement buckets as well that will help us to supplement our lifestyle. So at the end of the day, you need to be able to figure out how much money you're going to need in retirement approximately, because I know healthcare can kind of throw things off quite a bit, but you can even almost estimate how much your potential healthcare will be, because most of the time these retirement plans, these pension plans have a yearly maximum that you would be responsible for. So, depending on what your health is like, even in worst case scenario, you should know like, okay, maybe $15,000 a year is my max. So, plan for that. Plan for worst case scenario. $15,000 a year in healthcare. Now I have, it's going to be $2,000 a month for living for my apartment or my house. Then I have $1,000 a month for food or whatever, and just plan around that. Use your calculators. How much money is it going to take me at 8%, 9% to get to this particular level? And then you also need to factor in your pension. So any teacher with a pension, it's not going to be as cumbersome because you know that you're going to get that guaranteed level of support. Now, I will say with people who are in a lower or higher tiers in retirement, like even in Texas, I'm in tier 2. I've been fortunate because I'm under the rule of 80. But if you're like under the rule of 90, or if you're like tier 5 to where you have to be 62 before you can retire, if you want to retire early, now you need to figure out how you're going to buffer or bridge that gap in between when you want to retire and when you can actually start collecting your pension. So it's all a numbers game. So figure out what your final numbers need to be, and you need to decide or calculate how much you're going to need to put into retirement.
Yeah, and the important thing to realize is it's not about replacing your salary. It's about covering your expenses, right?
Yeah.
If your expenses are 75% of your salary, that's the amount that you're looking for. And I love how you're talking about your pension versus the gap versus these other things. So there's this idea of the 4% rule that everyone talks about, the idea that you need 25 times your expenses in a retirement account to be able to draw down from to fund your lifestyle for 30 years or more in retirement. And the great thing about having that pension is, let's say you have a pension that's $3,000 a month and it costs you $5,000 to live. You have a $2,000 gap left. That is what you need, that 25 times amount, which is way easier to get than the total 5,000 that you need. So having that pension as like the baseline, and then especially if you have a pension and Social Security, which often goes together for teachers these days, especially because I heard that they're considering dropping the WEP and the GPO and all that. That's on the table right now, which would be incredible. That's another
Senate
podcast.
time.
Huh?
The Senate just signed it. It's now
Oh,
it's now in Biden's hand. Yeah, they just signed it, I think, on Friday.
Oh man, I hadn't gotten that updated news. That's amazing. So, look
Yeah.
into that, everyone. It looks like we're going to be able to have an even better opportunity with those being dropped. So that's incredible that we can have Social Security and pensions going hand in hand for those that are contributing to both. And that's going to cover an even larger amount. So there's just so much opportunity for teachers. You don't need to have a huge nest egg But just keep in mind that, with cost of living adjustments, maybe not keeping up with inflation, or sometimes cost of living adjustments don't last the whole time, or, sometimes you just want to live a bit more. Having that extra money on hand gives you the freedom, gives you the choice. So determining how much money you want to have to spend in that retirement, give yourself that cushion, give yourself that buffer, and make that goal of whatever that number needs to be.
Hey man, you're hitting the nail on the head. At the end of the day, the beautiful thing about the individuals in the fire movement, the ones who have been able to retire early, is that they have mastered the ability to live far below their means. If you make $4,000 a month, but your expenses are $1,500 a month, that's $2,500 a month that you have been able to invest in and save. So now you are looking good for the future, and if you make Mike Tyson money, Evander Holyfield money, it doesn't matter if you are living above your means. That's just the bottom line. So you make some good points, man.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, let's wrap this up. It's been a great conversation. I've loved talking to you about setting goals, keeping to your goals, avoiding, lifestyle creep, and just the way to think about the goals you're going to set and how to figure out what number you need. There's just so many different things that come to goal setting. But just last two questions I ask all of my guests. First question for you is, what is your number one tip for teachers to have a richer wallet, classroom, and life?
Oh man, great question. So I could easily say, hey, you start investing immediately upon getting a job in a 403B or 457, a low cost provider like Fidelity or Vanguard. But I think that I wouldn't be doing them justice, because I think that the number one thing you need to do is to learn to live below your means. That's the bottom line, man. Like, if you tell people to invest, that's fine, but you can invest $1,000 a month, but then you could use your credit card, and now you are, buying Gucci and Prada and all these expensive things, but you're going into the hole each month because you're spending $1,500 a month extra over here, and you're investing $1,000 a month. You're still behind the game. So I would say to, you know learn how to live below your means. Bottom line, that starts with sitting down with either an accountability partner or a spouse or a fiance or whatever, and putting those numbers on paper. And if you need to go through some kind of budgeting class together, fine, but learn how to budget and learn how to live below your means. That's number one.
Yeah, learn to budget, live below your means. I feel I ask this for every single guest, and I think that's one of the ones that's come up the most. It's just learn the basics, right? You need to learn how to make a budget, and you need to learn how to live a budget. And it's just so powerful, really, having a plan. Like we talk about, and you mentioned this before, and I wanted to bring it up, begin with the end in mind, right? This is a teaching principle. You look at the assessment, and then you build backwards from the assessment. This is what I want them to know. You don't say, oh, I guess we maybe covered this. Let's see how they did, right? You begin with the end in mind, you go backward, right? Same thing with budgeting. You don't just walk into the classroom and say, let's wing it. You have a lesson plan, right? You're budgeting your time in the classroom. Now let's budget your money outside of the classroom, right? There are so many principles from teaching that apply 100% to your finances. You can just see those connections.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You're correct.
All right, so we got Rashad, the wealth coach. If someone wants to connect with you and learn more from your story, from your wisdom, how can they get in contact with you?
I guess I'll just give my email address, rashad98@gmail.com, if you want to reach out, if you have any questions. I absolutely love speaking about money. I came from a rough financial upbringing to where money was scarce and opportunities were few and far between. And that helped to, motivate me so that I don't have to put my kids through some of the things that I went through as a child financially. And I have the utmost respect for my parents. My mom's an educator. She's still teaching now, unfortunately, due to the fact that we didn't have much growing up. So now she's still teaching pre-K at 70, 74 years old. And my he's collecting his Social Security right now. So, at the end of the day, I want to be able to to help them. And I'm looking forward to having more of these conversations to help educators become financially independent. So Rashad98@gmail.com. I'd love to connect with anybody from your show.
Well, bless your mother for continuing to serve even long past when we'd want her to be able to retire. And I hope that you'll be able to support her and help her in that. And if you would like to get in contact with Rashad and you want to get the quick link to that email, or I'll also link to his YouTube channel, you can go to teachermoneyshow.com/podcast. You can find the show notes for all of the shows there, or if you go to underneath your podcast in the show, you can find the direct link to the page for Rashad there. And happy to connect you guys so you can learn from Rashad. Thank you so much, Rashad, for coming on the show. It's been so much fun. A pleasure to have you.
Hey, I appreciate you. Thanks, Shaun. I appreciate it, man. And good luck to you and all your listeners.
Wow. Thank you, Rashad. That was a ton of fun, a wealth of information. I love talking to Rashad. He's very smart, and he's got a good way of thinking about these problems that the teachers encounter, because he's living it and he has had to overcome these problems. He's also very, very active in Facebook groups, talking to teachers like 403BY's his Facebook group, and is always thinking through like how you could do this or how you can do that differently to really maximize your benefits as a teacher. Here are the cliff notes from my conversation with Rashad. Cliff notes are brought to you by Nectarine. Nectarine is a company that connects you with a financial advisor who is a fee-only financial advisor. They will not pitch you any products. They will not do any sales pitches of any kind. They just give you an hour of financial advice from a fiduciary for anywhere between $150 to $250. If you are trying to put into place the methods and the ideas that Rashad had for you today, consider going to Nectarine and getting the financial advice that you need to empower you. I'm an affiliate of Nectarine, which means I do get kickback for recommending this product, which creates a conflict of interest, but I do highly recommend this product. Now on to the cliff notes. The first thing to remember is to avoid lifestyle creep. Lifestyle creep is when what you spend meets what you have, or sometimes more, and you're just trying to get more and more stuff and live a more grand life. This is not going to benefit you in the long term. The way you can do this is with our next clip note, which is to cap that off by putting all of the money that you would get in a raise into investments. If the amount of money that you have in your bank account is never going up, it's really hard to inflate your lifestyle. So you can just keep that at a nice, low rate and continue to invest more and more. The third cliff note is to calculate your retirement number by your expenses and taking out the amount that you'll get from your pension. So that way you have a much smaller amount that you know that you need to have to bridge that gap in retirement. And if you have no money that you're going to need to have, and it's going to be covered entirely by your pension, then just know that all that money you put into retirement investing is just icing on the cake that's going to allow you to live a fantastic life. The fourth cliff note is to begin with the end in mind. I love this idea of where do you want to go, and then back into that. We do this all the time in the classroom, and it's the same thing to do with our finances. Visualize your life. What do you want your life to look like in retirement? How much is that going to cost? And then work back into that. So that way you know what your expenses will be, so you can calculate your retirement number. The fifth cliff note is to learn to live below your means. If you make a bunch of money, but you still spend all of it and then some, you're in a worse position than if you make a little bit of money but spend less than that. So learning to live below your means is the way that you are going to live your best life. Remember, if you would like to connect with Rashad or get any of the other things that we talked about in the show, you can go to teachermoneyshow.com/podcast and get the show notes there, or you can go down underneath in your podcast player and find a direct link. Remember, as a teacher, you are already rich. Your wallet just needs to catch up. Are you worried you won't have enough money to retire? Or maybe you just don't know how you're going to get out of all of this debt. Whatever your situation is, I can help you. Go to teachermoneyshow.com/guest and fill out the form there. And you can come on the show for free coaching, or we can meet one-on-one to discuss your needs. I look forward to talking to you.